Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Before I introduce our distinguished guests, I would like to begin with a quote from the late astrophysicist Carl Sagan. "The illegality of cannabis is outrageous, an impediment to full utilization of a plant which helps produce the serenity and insight, sensitivity and fellowship so desperately needed in this increasingly mad and dangerous world." Carl Sagan. But by making cannabis illegal, we have instead turned it into a tool for violence, exploited by criminals and organized crime, spanning many countries. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a unique moment in history. The Berlin Wall of the prohibition of cannabis is weak, and it is crumbling as we speak. And just as happened in Berlin in 1989, the old guards who used to protect the wall of cannabis prohibition are laying down their weapons and walking away. What remains to be done is to safely and systematically dismantle the wall of prohibition and replace it with a system of laws, international agreements, regulations, and standards to ensure a prosperous and, above all else, safe cannabis industry. We are moving forward. The states of Washington and Colorado are leading the way. We have waited long enough for some sort of a green light from Washington, D.C., telling us that it is okay to proceed. In fact, the silence from our nation's capital has been deafening. We are moving forward with our plans to build a national and eventually international network of cannabis businesses spanning the production, processing, distribution, and retail of cannabis and cannabis-based products. Our network will span both the medical and the social use cannabis markets. As a first step in building this national network, as CEO of Diego Pellicer Incorporated, I am proud to announce that we have acquired the rights to the Northwest Patient Resource Center, headed by Mr. John Davis, who I will introduce shortly. We are also in the final stages of acquiring a smaller but equally professional chain of medical cannabis dispensaries in the great state of Colorado. With these acquisitions, along with other acquisitions in the works from California to Washington, we are creating the first national brand of retail cannabis. We have also created the first risk-mitigated investment vehicle for investing directly in this $100 billion industry, which is growing by the day. This is a crucial development which will enable us to expand our business model into new markets. Our expansion will be cautious and measured, as my colleague John Davis will discuss. Next, it is my pleasure and profound honor to introduce to you a man who has dedicated his life to transforming his country and our world into a more peaceful, loving, and prosperous planet. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the first freely elected president of Mexico, Señor Presidente.
Congratulations for that position. This state state of Washington has decided to lead a new path, a path to change the paradigm by legalizing medical and social use of cannabis. In Mexico, we welcome this initiative because the cost of the war, in the case of Mexico, is becoming unbearable. Too high for Mexico, Latin America, and the rest of the world. The impact in the economy, on income, on tourism investment, loss of talent, and above all, loss of hope, and 80,000 kids dead in the last 6 years. All this because our neighbor to the north represents such a gigantic consumer market. We must get out of this trap, and here is the opportunity. Now this group here is moving accordingly from words into plans, and from plans into action, and the action in the arena. To play the real game, this group must understand the need to make good, safe, and legal use of these new laws for the benefit of the people and the common good. I am here convinced of the need for change and the search for new avenues in this difficult and unresolved issue. I am here to witness a paradigmatic change. I have too many questions about the implementation of these new laws and regulations and how it will impact our countries and communities. This is an issue of strategic interest and concern around the world. This historic step today is to be observed and evaluated closely by all of us because it is a game changer. Fox Center is an acting think tank, but also an action think tank. That is why we are here. A new culture will be emerging. New paradigm is arising, moving from criminalization to public health policies, separating health from violence and crime. Everybody should be attentive to ensure a positive, peaceful, and constructive transition to a new paradigm. This group of leaders here, government as well as lawmakers, have great responsibility upon their shoulders. They're making history, but they have to take this historic step to a safe port. The path is not easy. First and above all, the task is full compliance with the law, elimination of violence and crime, good responsible use of freedom, intense education programs and information, intense prevention practices, and the best possible benefits to the community within a solid foundation of morality, ethics, and values. To be successful is needed, number one, intense citizen, family, and community involvement. Number two, intense regulation on production, distribution, dealers, retailers, advertising, warnings, media behavior, quality controls, places to consume, ages to consume, prescriptions. Ensure at the same time integrity of all the players in the whole chain. Intense taxation to keep prices up and bring revenue to governments, to educate, to prevent, to inform. Intense information, intense education, intense prevention, intense third parties protection, intense responsible use of choice and freedom. Gains on this game: one, reduce and hopefully suspend income to organized crime and violence support. Intense increase in government's capacity to do the job. This will stop blood loss of youth like we have suffered in Mexico, and it's spreading out through Latin America. We all understand that we human beings perform best in scenarios of peace and harmony. A new, responsible society will bring this peace and harmony. About the losses, we cannot be worse than where we are. The war has been lost all along, and it has been lost again and again. It's time for a new start. It's time for a new vision. And that's why I applaud this group that has the courage to move ahead. They have the vision, they're clear where they're going, and I'm sure they're gonna get there. Thank you.
Next, I am proud to introduce Mr. John Davis, CEO of the Northwest Patient Resource Center and Executive Director for the Coalition of Cannabis Standards and Ethics.
Thank you, Jamin. What you see before you is a coalition. It's not just Diego, it's not just Northwest Patient Resource Center. It is a group of stakeholders that are here to help with the implementation of this task that we have in front of us, because as President Fox was saying, this needs to be done correctly. It needs to be done carefully, and it needs to be done with social responsibility. It needs to be done with respect. It needs to be done with the consent of the localities in which it's happening. We are going to be moving into other states as other states open up, but we are not going to force our way in. What we're going to do is we're going to show how it can work, and we're starting today in showing how it can work so that the rest of the world can look to Washington and see a success, a program that has success. And that's why we need to start now. We can no longer wait. If we're going to have success in this program, we're going to need to start today. There's infrastructure to be built if we're going to have success with Washington State. The world will look at Washington as the leader, and because of that, we reached a time in history where we had to become leaders, and this group of people here needed to become the leaders to show the rest of the world how it can be done correctly, how it can be done and reduce problems, how it can be done to reduce youth use, how it can be done without ties to organized crime, how it can be done not in a dark gray market. So that is our plan. We are going to work with all the stakeholders, every one of them, including small businesses that are out there. We're very respectful to the small businesses. We have no plans on doing anything to harm small businesses. It's already out there. In fact, we want to help. We want to help with lobbying. We want to help with to bring about changes in the law, and we want to help by showing a system of safety when the laws are followed to the T, where the taxes are paid. And so you'll be seeing a lot more of us. We'll be updating you periodically as to our progress. And I'll turn the mic over back to Jamin. Thank you.
Thank you, John. As a segue, prior to introducing our next speaker, Dr. Michael Osborne, I want to mention that 10 days ago today, we held our first ever symposium on the treatment of cancer with cannabis. And we held it at my alma mater, UC Berkeley. And we had 22 of the nation's leading experts and pioneers, truly pioneers in this industry of treating cancer with cannabis, because cannabis to this day remains illegal according to federal law, which means that it is impossible to do official medical studies, case trials, et cetera. So what we're doing is we're creating a pioneering effort to commence testing before, during, and after for patients who choose to treat their cancer with cannabis. And who better to address this topic than our next speaker, Dr. Michael Osborne, who is president of the Strang Cancer Prevention Institute, and he is one of the most recognized breast cancer surgeons in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Michael Osborne.
Thank you. And this is my first visit to Seattle, although I've been in the United States 30 years and lectured in almost every major city, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I've escaped 90-degree temperatures in New York City. My first exposure to cannabis in relation to cancer was about 30 years ago. I was working at the foremost cancer institute in the country in New York City, and one of my patients undergoing chemotherapy for breast cancer was really unable to tolerate the side effects of the chemotherapy and was contemplating stopping. She told me, however, that she had heard from somebody that cannabis might help her alleviate those symptoms. And it's true, today we've got much better medications to alleviate the symptoms than we had 30 years ago. But she was taking cannabis. And I asked her, as this was New York City, how she was obtaining that. I'm not revealing any patient-physician confidentiality here, but I can tell you that she said it's not a problem. My son is a New York City police officer. So it was very effective in her case, and she was able to complete her treatment successfully. And there is a long literature of the benefits of cannabis in a variety of medical situations, ranging from particularly long-term pain treatment, which may be related to cancer or other disease. In fact, in that arena, the United Kingdom has recently approved the use of cannabis for the symptoms of advanced multiple sclerosis, where standard medications no longer work. When you say treat cancer with cannabis, we really mean alleviate the symptoms of cancer treatment or the effects of cancer, such as chronic pain and a multitude of other symptoms. The cannabis itself does not treat the cancer, but I think in the limited studies that have been done for the reasons you've said, that federal funding is not there, there's a long history of success with it in those areas where they've been able to use it. I think just to bring you right up to date beyond the field of cancer, you may not be aware that in May this year, actually about 2 weeks ago, there was a publication from the Harvard School of Public Health, which I can tell you from within the medical profession is the ultimate source for public health matters, because they're following very large numbers of patients in studies of patients' health, and a variety of things we know about a variety of diseases have come from the Harvard School of Public Health. They particularly looked in a large group of 5,000 individuals they've been following for a long time at the effects on those who smoke cannabis. And they had three groups. They had the group that had never smoked it, the group that had not smoked within 30 days, who were considered past users, is their definition, and current users. And there was an astounding result from this study, which I think the implications of which are yet to be digested and looked at further. The first was that there was a profound effect on the insulin production in the body. And all of that, and its related studies, predict that this would significantly reduce the rate of diabetes, one of our greatest epidemics in the United States. And secondly, even more surprisingly, given that cannabis does increase the appetite, the measurement, they took the waist measurement as a surrogate for obesity, which I think we can all agree is pretty reasonable, and the current users had the lowest waist measurements of the entire group, and there was no change in the waist measurements and levels of obesity in the never users and past users. So nobody understands that mechanism of why a greater calorie intake would lead to a reduction in weight. And no doubt there's some metabolic processes that we don't understand and have yet to be determined as to how that's working. But given that obesity, attended by diabetes, is going to lead to the first time in history that the current generation is going to die younger than their parents, this is a monumental public health issue. And the more light that can be brought to bear on the potential benefits, and of course there are risks with every drug. I always advise people never read the PDR of the side effects of drugs, because you'd be scared witless. I take aspirin periodically, yet 160,000 people go to the hospital and 16,000 die from gastrointestinal hemorrhage. But that's extremely rare, considering the amount of aspirin. And I think the same with cannabis. There are obviously some downsides that have to be addressed from the medical point of view, but one has to weigh always the benefits to the risks. And from at least what it looks like now, the benefits considerably better than the risks. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne. And the developments, such as the studies that Dr. Osborne has cited, there are more studies which are ongoing, and the developments are coming in so rapid in this area of essentially medical research that we are actually holding our second symposium on the treatment of cancer with cannabis 11 days after the first symposium, which we held at Berkeley 10 days ago. The second symposium starts tomorrow at Roach Harbor on San Juan Island. And many of the folks in this room will be attending, and it is going to be an incredible symposium. So look forward to updates after the symposium, after the weekend. Next, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you distinguished Washington State veteran Skip Dreps, who is also a member of the Veterans Administration Institutional Review Board. Skip Dreps.
President Fox, Dr. Osborne Jamin, and my distinguished colleagues, thank you for the honor and privilege of being here today to talk to you. I have this statement prepared for you if you would like to stop taking notes and just listen to what I have to say. There's a copy available for everyone in the room, and Kinko's is downstairs, so I'm not worried. I recently asked Congressman Adam Smith to co-sponsor H.R. 1523, the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act of 2013, which would protect individuals who possess marijuana legally under Washington state law from federal prosecution. It would also provide businesses legally licensed to grow, process, and sell marijuana under state law with protections against prosecution under federal law. I presented him my case, and the former King County prosecutor agreed. Congressman Adam Smith is now Washington State's first co-sponsor. He stood up for the people he represents, and he is anxious as I am to help wounded warriors any way we can. And medical research and access to safe cannabis are two benefits of our state's plan to legalize cannabis for adult use that directly can help our disabled veterans in Washington State. We both believe if cannabis is safe and effective and can be controlled and regulated, it is our duty to leave no stone unturned to help them and anyone else who could benefit from this alternative medical treatment. Americans leave no one behind. And let me just pause right here in my official remarks and tell you a little bit about this bill, why it's so special. Last year, out of the bills that were presented to Congress, only 3% passed. The prognosis up until this morning was that this bill had maybe an 8% chance of passing. Today, the prognosis is over 70% of this bill passing. Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I'm so excited about this bill. Because it affords this state the opportunity to experiment for the rest of the nation on doing it right the first time before the other states get a chance to mess it up. But quite frankly, this bill, if you look at it, and let me repeat to you again one more time, H.R. 1523, it's just dropped last month by a Republican from California, Dana Rohrabacher. And there are 12 congressional members from 16 states that are already signing on or are signing on as I speak right now. And I'm sure the other 9 members of our congressional delegation in the House of Representatives are anxiously grabbing their pen and seeing right now how they can sign on too. They should. Now I'll go back to my prepared remarks. The current approach to federal medical marijuana or marijuana law enforcement creates a nation of uncertainty, producing confusion and widely divergent responses in states which has passed marijuana laws. This is unfair to the citizens of those states and frustrates the will of a growing majority of Americans as expressed through the state ballot initiatives and legislative measures, especially veterans. For a generation, veterans who have known cannabis is effective in reducing symptomatology of PTSD, and they used it illegally and unsafely, and until 2010, just 3 years ago, were afraid to tell their VA healthcare provider if they self-medicated with cannabis for fear of prosecution. Today, they are persecuted. Now a new generation who has a greater burden of 2 wars and many more deployments, more than mine, face a new signature wound of war, traumatic brain injury, and cannabis may hold the key for an effective alternative medical treatment for mild to moderate symptoms. And let me just stop there because I have a distinguished member from Harvard who knows economy, and Linda Blimes from Harvard 3 years ago wrote that the cost of this war was $5 trillion. $5 trillion to take care of the injured from this war. And I asked her just last week when I was in Washington, D.C., is that still true, Linda? Is it still that much? And she said, no, Skip, it's 7. Do I hear 9? 9? Do I hear 10? And if we don't do something, this tsunami is going to wash all over our country. The legalization of, thank you. The legalization of cannabis in Washington State will allow medical research, that's where my skin's in this game, to continue on possible medical uses of cannabis. If we could find a tool to help our wounded warriors, and it could be within our reach, would we be less of a grateful nation if we turned our back and refused to care for those who bore the burden of battle? We're Americans. Washington voters agreed that it was time for a new approach to marijuana by a big margin, 56 to 44%. The veterans and the active military swung that vote. We need all of our congressional representatives to hear our voices and hold them accountable to the will of the majority of Washington citizens if they remain either deaf or dumb. We Washingtonians are proud Americans, and we are free from fear. Moreover, we are grateful for the support of our Mexican neighbors in this journey together to help find peace and healing in both parts of one world as one people. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished veteran Skip Dreps. I don't know how we possibly top that, so we're not even going to try, but I'm just going to move forward. it's next my honor to introduce you to Henry Wykowski, the leading attorney in the cannabis industry who has won landmark cases where the IRS attempted to tax medical cannabis dispensaries of the kind which have been serving our veterans out of existence. Ladies and gentlemen, Henry Wykowski.
Thank you. I think that what we're seeing here today is an encouraging development for the state of Washington and our country as a whole. The people of Washington have spoken that the time has come for legalized adult use of cannabis and more research into its beneficial effects that result from its responsible use. I wholeheartedly support the program that was outlined by President Fox and commented on by John Davis. The time has come to acknowledge the failure of the war on drugs and move away from criminalization towards an understanding of the issue and a responsible strategy for addressing it. We know that cannabis dispensaries are valuable citizens to the communities in which they operate. They reduce crime, they increase employment, they increase taxes. Without them, all of that would go to the benefit of the drug cartels and organized crime. Which one is better to use? One of my predecessors said that the silence from Washington, D.C. is more than deafening. Is deafening. It's more than deafening. It's a national embarrassment. It's time for the Obama administration to respect the vote of the people of Washington and all of the other states that have voted for a more responsible way to address cannabis, medically and for adult use. I'm proud to be part of this movement, and I'm prepared to do whatever I can to ensure its continued success. And I hope that everybody else joins in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wykowski. Next, I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Aaron Smith, who is the Executive Director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is the trade association which represents the legitimate cannabis industry in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Smith.
Thank you, Jamin. Thank you, Jamin, and everybody, especially President Fox, for being here at this historic moment. This truly is history in the making. Today, we are ushering in the post-prohibition era in this country. What that means is that we are seeing, we're moving toward an end to horrific violence south of the border, an end to illegal marijuana sales in our parks and in our streets, and the beginning of a new American industry, an industry that will create thousands of sustainable, well-paying jobs, millions, if not hundreds of millions, in tax revenue, and breathe new life into this economy. And it's only a matter of time as this industry is developing and unifying through our organization and others to push for federal law reform. And to echo what Henry had said, it is well beyond time that the U.S. government recognize this as what it is, another legitimate industry that's supported by the voters, that's benefiting the community, and change federal policies, whether it be tax policy, banking regulations, or the Department of Justice policy and the overall arching prohibition of marijuana to treat regulated providers of cannabis, whether medical or for adult use, like any other business. And I commend Diego Pellicer and others here, Northwest Patient Resource Center, for taking the lead in this here in Washington. I think what we're seeing here is the beginning of something really beautiful in our country. And thank you not only for what you're doing for the industry, but what you're doing for our nation.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for what you're doing for our industry and our country. Next, and by the way, Charlie, are you? Were you gonna? Did you want to speak up here? No. Okay, got it. Last and certainly not least is a dear friend, Mike Moyer, who is also partner in the law firm of Dorsey and Whitney, and I'm proud to say is our securities lawyer, Mike Moyer.
Thank you, Jamin. I'm less of a speaker here today, but more of just to vocalize my support. I'm honored to be sitting at the same table as the experts here. The eloquence that I've heard and the arguments are absolutely compelling for what you're doing at Diego, from a health, societal, fiscal foundation, both for the United States and internationally. Clearly, this is an important path that you're setting out on and leading through Diego. I'm an emerging companies securities and corporate finance attorney. I do represent Diego Pellicer. And the one point that I'd like to make today is that Diego has insisted from the time that we started working together that we do everything in our power to help them hold up to the highest level of compliance with the law. And it's a company with great integrity, with excellent leadership and excellent vision. And we will continue to provide that guidance, but we want to make absolutely clear that just like Northwest PRC, which has the highest level of integrity in the industry, Diego intends to be that same party on the broader scale, and that's what we're here to help them with.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for being here. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions from anyone in the room, and we'll just raise your hand and we'll go one at a time. Yes, miss. Mm-hmm.
Hi, Chairman. Can you tell us a little bit more about the acquisitions and some of the new developments? What exactly do you own now in Washington State and Colorado, and what are your next steps?
Great, very good question. So what we are acquiring, and for each particular company, it's a different case. But what we're acquiring are a specific set of rights which are completely compliant with the law and at the same time protect our company and our investors as we move through this transition period while the Berlin Wall of prohibition of cannabis is replaced with a complete body of law, policy, precedents in the court system, rules and regulations. So I know that's an answer which, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up, what rights do you mean? I'm wondering, is there going to be new branding of the different...
Yes, there will be new branding. So the stores of the Northwest Patient Resource Center, as well as the chain of dispensaries, which we're in the process of acquiring in Colorado, all of those will be rebranded at the end of next month. Thus creating the first national brand of medical cannabis.
How many stores do you plan in the state?
In the state of Washington, we plan to have for medical or for social use or both? Both? Both. Yeah. For both medical and social use, the number will be in the dozens for the state of Washington.
Colorado?
Colorado, it will also be in the dozens.
California?
California, it will be in the high dozens to hundreds.
What about Mexico?
For Mexico, I'm going to turn that over. I'm going to ask permission of President Fox. May we open retail establishments in your country, President Fox?
Mexico's a little bit behind in the different considerations around the issue. And right now, undergoing this war, makes it more difficult to start building on the positive side. And this is my claim, and this is what we are impulsing and promoting in Mexico, to start a serious debate, which fortunately now one of the three leading political parties decided and announced publicly that they are going to put through a bill into Congress related to cannabis. So we're moving, but yet around cannabis, the same as is done here. Yes, I think they are taking inspiration on the ones presented here, which, by the way, I understand the state of Maryland also recently moved ahead. But yes, Mexico, and that's part of the reason I'm here, is we want to move faster because we are paying the cost. We are paying with thousands of lives. We're paying with a huge decrease in our tourism flows. We're losing our talent of people moving out from Mexico to live in the States. So it's something that has to be changed, and we must get out of that trap. So we have to work hard, but I hope we can narrow the gap as of Mexico compared to these leading states, these liberal states. So I hope pretty soon we will be having a press conference like this, or maybe I'm going to be inviting these symposiums to Central Fox to be held there. That's the way to create the presence of the issue and try to move it ahead.
President Fox, Jamin has proposed free trade in cannabis between the two countries. How would that work, and how far are we from attaining something like that?
Well, as I said, right now, Mexico being in this war does not have time to think about anything else. But I think it's very reasonable to think like that, and we have to question ourselves in Mexico. Once that this distribution channel is open, and Mexico does have production of marijuana, maybe not as much as produced here in the States, but we do have production. And we have to question ourselves what is next step in that direction. And I'm sure the advance here will oblige the Mexican authorities, Mexican Congress, and Mexican public opinion to start discussing the issue, answering the questions, and preparing for a new world, for a new paradigm that I'm sure we're going to be living a few years from now. South America is moving also with great dynamism. Uruguay, Paraguay, and others are already submitting to their national congresses reforms. So this is on the move. Public opinion is way ahead of governments today.
Mr. President, are you a business investor in any chance, in any way with Diego Pellicer? And how did you come to be here today? How did the conversation get started?
Well, in my words, I tried to explain that. No, I'm an outsider here, invited by my friend, which I'm very proud of him. He not only has a very Mexican heart and love for Mexico, but also speaks pretty good Spanish. And he invited me to come, and it coincides with the effort we're doing at Central Fox. We're a think tank. That's the first presidential library ever built outside of the United States. But we're more than a museum. We're a very dynamic entity as a think tank, as an academic place. So we're most interested in being here and hope we can bring in support and hope that we can move Mexico to this new state of discussions, serious, professional, and as we are witnessing here. I'm going to go back home very excited. I'm going to be promoting more intensely than ever that this is the solution.
President, what would you say to President Obama and the federal government about what they should do on the issue of marijuana?
If I may, I just before con su permiso, there's one how we came to know each other. Actually, it was 13 years ago, almost to the day, that President Vicente Fox made his first ever official trip as president of Mexico to the state of Sinaloa to inaugurate the 25th Educational Computer Center, which my company at the time, Shively International, was inaugurating in the city of Culiacan. And President Fox, as he is taking a strong leadership position on this particular issue of cannabis and ending the war on drugs, President Fox was and continues to be a courageous leader for education and for bridging the digital divide in Mexico. And we were honored to work together and partner on solving that problem in Mexico so many years ago. And thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Your thought, what would you say to President Obama about how the federal government here should handle marijuana?
Well, I guess they just have to hear the loud voice of people, and not only the loud voice, but the vote of people like here the state of Washington or Colorado, or the 45 plus referendum result in California, and the 50% Gallup poll, national poll that shows that 50% of people is ready to go. The first step, cannabis. So he will just have to adapt to this. Let's go back to the origin. Over 100 years ago, there was no prohibition, nor for marijuana or cannabis or alcohol or cigarettes or anything. Because of religious reasons, prohibitions started. And we know that prohibitions don't work. Not even the apple in Garden of Eden. The forbidden apple sustained the prohibition. So this is going to change, and politicians will have to adapt. If they're close to people, if they're close to their constituencies, they'll have to follow what people is ordering today. To let individual responsibility on these issues. Founding fathers of this nation stated that governments do not have the right to intervene in our behavior, in our conscience, unless it affects third parties. But if not, like is the case that we're discussing here, governments shouldn't even intervene in imposing behaviors or imposing prohibitions that don't work.
Chairman, are you concerned about
also, we need to ask why not, because the answer would probably, we ask why not do this, we're not going to have a very good answer.
Good comment.
Can you
Always with good comments.
Can you address the fact that, I mean, you're basically holding a news conference to announce an interstate conspiracy to distribute an illegal substance? I mean, are you concerned about the implications of this?
Great question. Great question. We are actually conspiring to obey the law and to be consistent with policy. In fact, I commend President Obama for having a very, very consistent policy as regards cannabis. And other experts at the table know more about this specific topic, but in my simplified view, the way I see it is that the policy can be summarized in one simple statement. Go after the true criminals. John Davis is not a criminal. John Davis is serving the veterans in our community and other patients in our community. And I'd like to pass the mic to John for a moment to talk more about that.
Yeah, addressing the criminality is, it's in the structure of the deal. Northwest Patient Resource Center will live on as a standalone entity. A lot of the stuff and a lot of the questions that are being answered here have to do with the future. And the future is not a set target. It's a moving target. And we're going to have to be very dynamic in the way we deal with this. Because the future is going to, we will try to craft the future as much we can, but a lot of the times we're going to have to react to the future. And Northwest Patient Resource Center will still be wholly owned and a Washington-centric company. No funds are going to travel interstate, and certainly no cannabis is going to travel interstate. We respect the law enforcement, the Justice Department, and we realize that traveling interstate at this time is forbidden, and therefore we will not do it.
Henry, can you address this a little bit more? I mean, is it true that all of the dispensary owners who have been targeted by the Obama administration are criminals?
Absolutely not. And I can tell you that when the Harborside Health Center was served with its forfeiture action, the city council members of Oakland, Councilperson Rebecca Kaplan, at a press conference stated publicly that if the Department of Justice wanted to go after the dispensaries that were not in compliance with the law, why didn't they come to the city council and ask them who they were, and they would identify them? They should not go after the dispensaries that are established and run in an exemplary manner, that are transparent and are in compliance with all state law.
Okay, well, given that, can you...
I think that the national government has to re-examine its position. As President Fox stated, the majority of people believe that cannabis should not be treated in a criminal fashion, and that they need to take the lead from the states. Look at all the states that have legalized medical cannabis. We now have 2 states that have legalized adult use, and there are many more to follow. Why the federal government has not recognized this is, as I said earlier, it's an embarrassment. Where is the enlightened leadership that we were promised when we voted for President Obama?
Can you follow up, though? Can you address then how you can say that there's a risk-averse investment strategy? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's a risk-mitigated investment.
Mitigated. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So what that means is that both Diego Pellicer, as a company, which is making very particular targeted investments and acquiring specific rights in the realm of other companies which are established in the industry, neither Diego Pellicer nor our investors are exposed to any significant risk in terms of criminal risk. Of course, there is always investment risk, but in terms of criminal risk, that is vastly mitigated.
How is it mitigated if it's a federal conspiracy?
It's, as I said, it's a conspiracy to obey the law and to work within the law and within policy.
I'm not sure the Justice Department would agree with you.
Well, you know,
how have you mitigated your risk? I mean, you're still investing in something that's illegal under federal law.
We are making strategic investments, but we're making them in such a way that they are not in violation of either federal or state law.
But how does that work? You haven't really explained.
So the particular details of the contracts that we are entering into with other companies are private. And so what I'm giving you are answers to your questions.
You know, I just want to say, too, that the Brookings Institute just did a really great discussion a few months ago about this, and...
I'm sorry, are you a journalist?
I'm sorry, are you have lots of...
I'm actually...
It's all right, it's all right.
Can I ask a question
Yeah, go ahead.
about your investment? So Diego has filed with the SEC in March a document that says that you're only trying to raise $625,000 and had only raised $125,000. So I'm trying to understand, where are these investments? How big are they? And what are they? Because it sounds like all you've acquired are perhaps options to buy some dispensaries.
So a lot has happened between March and the present. And in terms of the specific details of the contracts which we have with other companies in the industry, those are privileged contracts, and the details are privileged.
Can you give us an overall number of you know, for the acquisitions, what the cost has been so far?
No.
Why aren't you trying to help an industry here? I mean, get going. Why are you being so quiet about this?
So here's the thing. We are trying to help an industry here, and we're taking a lead in moving the industry forward. At the same time, we have shareholders, and we have accountability and responsibility to our shareholders and to our company and to our officers and directors. And just as any responsible corporation in the United States protects its intellectual property, so does Diego Pellicer.
As you know, many people don't even see a future for medical marijuana in this state, including the campaign director for Initiative 502. why invest in medical marijuana dispensaries? Are they even needed?
Yeah, first of all, they are absolutely needed. As our distinguished veteran Skip Dreps has pointed out, I think there's no doubt on the table that they are needed. And as far as the future of medical marijuana dispensaries and how the overall market will be shared between medical dispensaries and social use stores, retail stores, first of all, it's an established fact that the majority of the products are in common. The majority of the products sold by those two types of entities will be in common. And so much of the market demand for either one of those segments can be addressed by the other. Now, there are ethical questions for somebody who wants to buy social use cannabis, buying it at a medical dispensary, and vice versa. And so it is our belief and our position that both markets need to be addressed by their own specific targeted businesses. Having said that, one of the possibilities that's been discussed, and I'll ask John to comment a bit more on this, is the possibility of having hybrid retail establishments which address both markets.
At this point in the process of implementation of 502, the infrastructure has not been built. The infrastructure that exists for production of quote-unquote legal recreational cannabis does not exist. The places that are currently producing are zoned improperly. They do not have permits. They have an electrical subpanel that was not inspected. And most importantly, most of them are in residences. We've looked at the market and done a study of the market, and we have found the infrastructure sorely lacking. And therefore, we believe that recreational cannabis for these shops is going to be very, very rare because the facilities that can produce them are not there. Now, we as a coalition are going to work on doing that, and that's part of what we're talking about and moving forward is making this infrastructure that's needed for the success of the program. And that is one of the things that we're going to be doing. However, someone that's opening a store in Washington State solely for the purpose of selling recreational marijuana is going to find out quickly that there is no supply of recreational marijuana. And in order to cover their overhead expenses, they are going to have to sell the scarce marijuana that they do have at a very high price. And the good thing about dispensaries is dispensaries can offer both. Northwest Patient Resource Center currently covers its overhead with medical cannabis in a safe, secure environment. We are happy to bring recreational in so that we can use that as an augment. And it's an appropriate place to do it. We're already there. And we're looking at becoming hybrid in order to to help success in the program.
Where will you
Jalen,
get?
can I ask you a quick question? Maybe I missed this at the very top of the presser, but I'm hoping you can cite three numbers. One being the total investment you see going into this brand. The second being the number of jobs you see that funding. And third, how many customers you might expect a year in all of the initial investments.
Good. So if we look at a time scale of, say, the next 3 years, I can't give you a precise number, but the total investments in the Diego Pellicer brand and in our medical cannabis brand, which we'll be announcing and launching next month, the total investments will be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And the size of the market that we will be addressing is measured in the tens of millions of customers.
The number of jobs you anticipate?
Number of jobs, starting right here in the city of Seattle, it'll be on the order of well over 1,000 jobs just for our headquarters function over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. Of course, we'll be ramping up because the brands that we're creating are eventually going to be international brands. And so we're going to have a very large headquarters function right here. But the vast majority of the jobs, which will number well into the tens of thousands, will be in the local markets that we will serve.
Do you have a cannabis supply lined up yet?
We have relationships with some of the top growers in the state of Washington, some of whom are in this room, as well as some of the top growers in the state of Colorado and in California.
And I'll add, there currently, after our study, we identified 2 growing organizations that we believe can enter this new market, and we have relationships with both.
The social use market, that is.
Social use.
Yes,
Oh, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
Jonathan
Yeah.
Kinsey with Reuters. When we spoke yesterday,
Yeah.
you indicated that you were in the process of raising $10 million.
Mhm.
Is that still accurate?
Yeah, our very first investment round is $10 million.
And when will that be completed in?
At the rate that we're going, probably in the next couple of weeks at the most.
And then, if leaving aside like the policy question of whether it's wise or not for the Obama administration or the DOJ to go after you guys, I was wondering if Mr. Mayor could address how is this structured so that the money, the investments, that nothing would be touchable by federal forfeiture laws.
You know, everything that's about the structure is confidential, so we're not going to speak to that right now.
But you're confident that federal forfeiture laws wouldn't?
We're not, as John said, this is a moving target. So, you know, medical marijuana itself has its own developed infrastructure, but recreational is not, which is why Diego is being as careful as it is about the way it's structuring things and the way it's getting into relationships with folks in Colorado and Washington.
So Diego will be the social use brand only?
Continuing as a wholly owned and standalone institution, what exactly have you acquired? Is it an ownership stake or something else?
Sure. So first, let me answer the first question you asked, which is Diego Pellicer will be the brand for social use cannabis, and then we're launching the first national brand for medical use cannabis next month. And your question, sir, can you repeat, please?
If Northwest Patient Resource Center is going to continue on as a wholly owned and standalone body, what exactly are you acquiring?
Yeah, so what we're acquiring is a specific set of rights with respect to the Northwest Patient Resource Center, and beyond that, it's privileged.
What rights? I mean,
So how do we talk about this?
You can talk about it however you want. I mean, what rights, what part of privilege don't you understand?
Next press conference.
Pardon me?
Well, if you say you're establishing the first national brand, what does that mean?
Yeah. So what that means is, for the first time in the history of the United States, you will see stores, medical cannabis dispensaries, in more than one state with the same brand.
Is it a matter of just packaging or also quality control, and you get each one tested so everyone knows what's in each packet?
Absolutely. We will be moving towards standardization. However, one very important point is that one law that we're absolutely adamant about adhering to is that there will be no transfer across state lines of cannabis. And given that, it will therefore, the product which is sold in Colorado must be produced in Colorado, and the product which is sold in the state of Washington must be produced in the state of Washington. You can imagine what the market for bourbon would look like if the bourbon which was consumed in Florida had to be produced in Florida rather than Kentucky. So it's a constraint, which is a significant constraint for us operating a national business, but it's a constraint that we have to live with for the time being. And we look forward to those constraints being relaxed.
Do you have any concerns about finding adequate supply?
Absolutely. For medical cannabis, there is adequate supply currently, given the current state of the market, but the market is expanding. And as John pointed out, for the supply for the social use cannabis market, I'll let John speak to that because he understands those aspects much better than I do.
I don't believe that we'll have any problem sourcing cannabis in the short term. But as I say, recreational is going to be rare to begin with. The program, think of it as a clutch engaging. There's going to be some slippage before the wheels start moving, and that's why we have to do it in the manner that we're doing it, and why there is some proprietary information involved. Recreational will be rare. We will have it at Northwest Patient Resource Center, and we will be working to help the industry be born, but it will be rare in the near term. But we will not, I'm confident in our product supply.
So have you acquired some of the smaller dispensaries in Washington? I mean, I see in the folks behind you, at least one person I recognize is somebody who runs them. It'd be great to hear from them.
Sure. So we're having conversations right now with a number of companies, and we're looking at specific deal terms which vary company by company and state by state according to state laws. So the deals that we're working on in the state of California are very, very different from those in the state of Washington, and vice versa for Colorado, et cetera.
So at this point, you have not acquired any smaller individual?
Well, let me take a little bit, and I'll give it back to Jamin. When you're doing this, something like this, you have to be very, very careful about how you do it. And a lot of the smaller dispensaries out there have got some survivorship liability. We have to make sure anyone that we're acquiring the business from has got to be clean. Have done everything right, have paid their taxes correctly, who've paid sales tax. We don't want historical liability coming into the company.
Understandable, but given that, have you yes identified some of those yet, or have yet to?
Oh, we've identified a number of smaller medical cannabis dispensary operators who were very interested in either entering into a strategic alliance relationship with, all the way to a full-out acquisition, if and when the laws sufficiently allow for that. And in the meantime, what we do is we create and structure deals which are appropriate to both to the present state of laws and policy, as well as to the particulars of the relationship that we want to have with the business.
So you have acquired the rights of some smaller independent.
Well,
I mean,
No, well, as I say, this is a process. We have to go through it. I'm helping as much as I can, and some can. And we will be looking into that. However, not everyone wants to be a part of what we are doing. Some of them want to stay independent, and that's great. We're going to help them do so, and we're going to have relationship with them. We're going and meeting the various business entities out there and basically saying, what's the best way for us to coexist together? But at this point, we are still looking into various businesses.
Are you big marijuana?
Yes, we are big marijuana.
Is that a problem?
It's not a problem for us. For us, it's a huge opportunity, and it's an honor to be at this particular place in history at this particular time. But I want to say that we are prominent right now because of the work that has been done and the sacrifices which have been made over the course. It's worthy of an applause, actually, of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who have stood up for the plant cannabis long before we had Initiative 502 or even any of the medical cannabis laws. There were people who were struggling and fighting, and in some cases dying, for the right for this plant to exist and for people and the plant to enjoy the beautiful symbiosis that we enjoy today.
I'm sorry, what was the question? It's not prohibited under 502. We work closely with the Liquor Control Board and will continue to do so. The Liquor Control Board has been great to work with, and what you have to understand is that these are people in the Liquor Control Board that are also dedicated to the success of the program. and it's going to be difficult to find successes in the program. So we're working together to find out what works. Hello, Roger.
Roger, welcome. Thank you for being here today. In fact, I want to introduce to you State Senator Roger Goodman. Roger.
Thank you. Not a state senator yet. I'm a state representative.
Sorry.
Apologize for the delay in my arrival. We had to vote on taxes in Olympia today. So just raced up here from Olympia because I didn't want to miss this. Cannabis is here to stay, and the legal market is the way to go. We are doing the right thing. But we have to make sure we do it right because this is the first jurisdiction, along with Colorado, on the entire planet where we have decided to take the right path and establish a rational regulatory system as an alternative to the prohibition approach, which President Fox probably talked about, has had just ravaging, devastating consequences in Mexico and other countries. So we're proud to be taking the lead, but we have to do it very carefully, and we have to establish a strict regulatory system. I've been saying we need to over-regulate to start, and then perhaps relax over time as the world sees that the sky is not going to fall. In fact, we are going to protect children better. We're going to clean up public spaces. I'm the chair of the House Public Safety Committee in the legislature, so I have an interest in public safety more than anything else. And yes, we'll collect revenue that will fund education and health care, but this is a win-win for everyone, including courageous entrepreneurs here who will be leading the way and setting an example for the world. The world is watching, America is watching, and the federal government better back off. Yeah. So.
Jamin, you say you are big marijuana?
Yes.
How big do you plan to get?
The current market in the United States is estimated to be somewhere around $100 billion. It could be less, it could be more. The projected size of the United States market once fully, full legalization with regulation exists across the country. Our estimates somewhere in the ballpark of $200 billion for the United States market. And the total worldwide market would be somewhere north of $500 billion. And we intend to be the #1 brand both in social use cannabis and in medical cannabis in both those markets on a worldwide basis. So the size of our company in terms of revenue will, if we do our job right, and I believe that we will, that we are, will measure in the hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. Yes, sir.
Have you done any studies on the income that will be produced from sales taxes and also from the reduction in the criminals, I put in inverted commas, that are in prison at the present moment who would not be in prison?
Great. Great. On the tax and revenue side, Roger, may I pass that one to you? Okay, thanks.
So as far as the revenue that will come at least to Washington State, we're not booking any of that. We're actually struggling to balance the budget at this very moment. That's why I had to be detained in Olympia. So we're not counting on any of the revenue coming in, at least over the next year, because we just have to set up the regulatory system. Conservatively, $100 million in the first year for the state, and perhaps more realistically, somewhere between $100 and $400 million to just this state in revenue that we want to dedicate to education. I've been a champion for early childhood education. I want kids to be ready for kindergarten, and I want that money to go to preschool. Maybe others will battle with me over where the money should go, but it'll be put to good use. As to criminals and so forth, there's already been well-documented reductions in the needless cost of law enforcement to arrest and prosecute and confine people for using cannabis. And then that combined with the revenue increase, it will be a net benefit to the state.
Jamin, what will be the next steps that we will see as tangible progress in these very bold
Yeah. So the very next steps that you'll see next month, you'll see the launch of the first national brand of medical cannabis in the country. You will see Diego Pellicer continuing to enter into strategic alliance relationships and acquisitions across the country, specifically in those states which permit medical cannabis. And as the social use rules and regulations are developed and implemented in the states of Washington and Colorado, you will definitely see aggressive growth of the Diego Pellicer brand in those two markets and in other markets as they pass their own specific legislations or changes to the Constitution.
And I'll add that work has to be done to go into the localities to make sure that the political work is done beforehand, to make sure that the localities know what our plans are before we come into them and are comfortable with us. We're not going to go into localities where we're not welcome. But we're going to, as I say, by showing success here, we're going to help people be comfortable with us moving into new markets.
Let's not lose focus. And I want to synthesize this meeting. What a difference it makes to have Jamie here sitting on my side instead of Chapo Guzman. This is the story that has begun to be written here. A totally different story that will bring in peace, harmony to communities, that will bring back freedom, exercise with responsibility to people, that will bring back a very solid industry. It's pretty difficult sometimes to accept or evaluate or analyze the new paradigm. As I said before, a lot of questions can be arising. But sitting here with my friend, instead with Chapo Guzman, which you know is the capo of capos in Mexico, running the business, this is a much better option, no doubt.
Vámonos. Hablando de vámonos. Tenemos, one more question in English, and then we're going to switch to Spanish because we have Marta, another distinguished guest from media which represents Spanish language media both in Mexico and in the United States. So, yes, sir.
Jim, just almost everybody here knows about Diego Pellicer, but if you could just sum up in a nutshell as if someone had never heard of Diego Pellicer, what is Diego Pellicer?
Yeah, thank you. So Diego Pellicer is the most recognized brand in an industry which today does not exist. In other words, we have launched the brand before we have actually opened the market. The market for what? The market for social use cannabis. So Diego Pellicer Diego Pellicer is my great-grandfather. And he was born in southeastern Spain in the small town of Era Alta in the region of Murcia in the 1860s. And he was educated in Madrid. And after completing his civil engineering degree, he was given a choice to join one of the wars of conquest in Africa or to join on the civil side of the Spanish government in the Philippines. He chose the latter option, I'm proud to say, and he became vice governor of the Philippines, and he became the largest grower of hemp in the world. He supplied the Spanish Armada, the Spanish fleet, with hemp rope during the Spanish-American War, and he died during the war. And this is a way for me and for our company to honor the legacy of my great-grandfather. And this is a beautiful artistic rendition of his face, and we've got another image in the back, which is an actual black and white photograph of Diego Pellicer taken in the late 1800s. And as this industry has evolved, and as I have learned more about the industry, we have fallen in love both with the plant and also with the medical cannabis segment of the market. and what the medical cannabis segment of the market is doing for patients and for veterans and for people across just a very broad spectrum. So we have made the strategic decision to enter the medical cannabis segment of the business, which is right now the only segment of the business which is generating revenue in a legal way. And it's also a perfect platform, near perfect platform for us to catapult ourselves into the social use market in the future. And with that, yes.
Since I was late, I just wanted to make one comment. We've been hearing a lot of concerns from law enforcement, from parents, from teachers. I'm a parent of 2 young children myself. They say, oh, it's just, we're letting the genie out of the bottle. And one more substance to enter our society, and we're throwing in the towel, and so forth. Well, with tobacco, they lied, and they promoted their product, deadly product, to kids. And we're holding them accountable. With alcohol, it's not sufficiently regulated, and we need to regulate it better. But this is different. I think we do have to distinguish cannabis from the other substances because of its medical benefits, but also because the cannabis markets have been in the shadows and are due credibility. And I think the industry will earn credibility by not promoting it to kids. No sexy images attracting users who shouldn't be using it. I think that this industry, and I will do what I can to help promote that, will be honest and will promote responsible adult use and prevent use by young people that would be harmful. So I think it's important to distinguish the marketing tactics and the substance itself from the other intoxicants in our society.
Great. Thank you, Roger. And now we're going to entertain questions in Spanish from the Spanish language media. A sus órdenes, Marta.
Independientemente de que pueda hablar con ustedes
Sí.
en el futuro, mi pregunta es para el presidente Fox. Presidente Fox, ¿a usted le gustaría ver que esto sucediera en México? Ya lo dijo, pero me gustaría escucharlo en español, que esta legalización se diera en México y en Latinoamérica.
Por supuesto que sí, ha sido mi compromiso trabajar intensamente en que estos temas se ventilen públicamente, se debatan, se llegue a conclusiones, se implementen y se pongan en marcha, que es exactamente lo que vemos aquí. Este día por eso es histórico, porque hoy está ya aterrizando las discusiones de mucho tiempo en hechos concretos. Y a mí me da un enorme gusto eso y espero para México, as soon as possible, lo más rápido posible, que ya estemos hablando de estas cosas públicamente, pero que sobre todo ya estemos llevándolas a la práctica. Vamos a salvar muchísimas vidas, miles y miles y miles de vidas de jóvenes que han sido sacrificados en este mundo que no ha podido resolver un tema de siempre. Creo que la prohibición nos sirve y México tiene que moverse rápido hacia adelante.
Presidente Fox, contrario a lo que usted está diciendo, el presidente Peña Nieto acaba de decir que no va a legalizar la marihuana, que no va a haber legalización de drogas en México. ¿Qué le dice usted al presidente Fox, al presidente Peña, y sobre todo que acaba de estar en Colombia y estuvieron hablando de la legalización en Latinoamérica?
Bueno, esto no es una decisión unipersonal. El trabajo es generar una cultura, generar un debate público, que lleguen las iniciativas a los congresos, y esto es lo que ya está por suceder en México, y en ese debate seguramente la opinión pública se expresará abiertamente, sin cortapisas. Yo estoy seguro que estamos en camino de alcanzar eso. Mientras yo aplaudo lo que está haciendo aquí, espero que crezca con mucha rapidez hacia otros estados. Yo mencioné Maryland, estuve por ahí hace un mes y ahí también ya procedió esto y así seguirán otros. Igual está en Europa, después del ejemplo de Portugal, después del ejemplo de Holanda, han otros debatido el tema y están haciendo cambios significativos. Lo mismo sucede en Latinoamérica. Así pues, creo que la época de las prohibiciones se termina, quedan en el siglo XXI y la época de este siglo será el ejercicio de la libertad de elegir con responsabilidad para cada persona, y ciertamente eso nos llevará a cuidar la salud como un bien primordial y especial que hemos recibido. Cuidar nuestro cuerpo, cuidar nuestra mente es fundamental y se puede hacer en un ambiente de legalidad y en un ambiente de liberalidad para poder tomar decisiones responsables.
Una pregunta para Jamin. ¿Cómo como empresario vas a lidiar con las reglas en Washington, en Colorado, en California y el gobierno federal?
Muy bien. Nuestro gasto principal como empresa son nuestros gastos legales. Y yo sé que esto les hace muy feliz a mis compañeros que están a la derecha, y seguirá siendo nuestro principal gasto, porque nosotros necesitamos depender del expertise sobre su dominio de abogados de las seguridades, abogados en el régimen criminal, abogados que se especializan en la política y en lo que se llaman los precedentes legales, que se establecen únicamente en base a casos legales que se dan en nuestros sistemas de cortes. Entonces, esto es algo que nosotros continuamente estamos estudiando, estamos dominando la materia entre nuestro equipo. No hay ni un solo experto que lo domina completamente, y por eso nosotros trabajamos como equipo para absolutamente guiarnos por las leyes, por las reglas, por todos los permisos que nuestras empresas y nuestros afiliados necesitan sacar para poder hacer negocio y trabajar dignamente y respetando las leyes.
Muchas gracias.
¿Me permites hacer para la Cámara un comentario más, el que hacía hace unos momentos? Qué mejor manera de expresar este momento histórico y este cambio radical hacia un nuevo paradigma que poder estar sentado aquí hablando de cannabis y de droga con un verdadero experto, Jamie, en lugar de estar al lado de un capo como el Chapo Guzmán, que ha destrozado a nuestro país y que ha destrozado vidas a lo largo y ancho de México.
¿Alguna otra pregunta en español? Por el momento. Any other questions in English? French? Oh, one more. Yes, yes.
Because the 502 laws don't allow a retailer to have any interest in a producer processor and vice versa.
Yeah.
How are you working with that?
Yeah. So there's two answers to that question. There's short term and there's long term. The short term answer is with relationships with suppliers who are growers, and those relationships, of course, must stay absolutely within the confines of the law and the rules and the regulations, and not just the letter of the law, but also the intent of the law. Now, having said that, our ultimate goal, as long as it becomes at some point legal for us to have full vertical integration, we would like to be, in that case, a fully integrated enterprise.
Yes, laws need to change, but it's a moving target. And to answer your question, I'll say we have a fine set of attorneys and knowledge of drug policy, and we're working on it.